8 C0 teams for Citlali, let's get straight into it. You could be forgiven for thinking this isn't a good patch for Arlecchino with us having a new pyro DPS in Mavuika, but that's not the case. Citlali will enable some solid melt comps for Arlecchino, and if you want to run mono pyro, Lanyan isn't a bad addition to the game for it either. As you know by now, Arlecchino can't be healed by her teammates, only by her own burst. Given the fact it's not the most reliable method of sustainability, she prefers a shield. Citlali buffs her team's pyro damage through 4-piece scroll, reduces the opponent's resistance to pyro through a passive, as well as applying a bit of cryo so Arlecchino can melt some of her hits. She's a catalyst user too, so you could go for supportive weapons like a signature, Thrilling Tales, or Wandering Evenstar. For the other cryo slot, I'd advise going with one of either Rosaria for the extra crit rate, or Kaya if you have his C6. It felt as good as Arlecchino's Yolan teams, and it gave me an opportunity to take Kaya off the bench, which is appreciated because I love his design. Another character that didn't need a new teammate but seems to get one every patch anyway is Neuvillette. A couple more buffs and he might be playable one day. Most people run him in a team consisting of Farina, Kazuha, and then one of Xiaolonen or Zhongli. There are debates over which sustain unit to choose. Some believe the offensive benefits of Xiaolonen are more valuable while others opt for Zhongli's shield. Neuvillette has shit resistance to interruption, so what good are the offensive buffs if your charge attacks keep getting interrupted? Citlali gives us another option. She has a shield, albeit not as strong as Zhongli's. Her 20% hydro resistance shred is the same as his, and she can also give a 40% hydro damage bonus from 4-piece scroll. Xiaolonen can shred resistances by another 16%, but she doesn't have a shield. Citlali is a best of both worlds option that provides both offense and sustainability while only compromising a little on each. It's also worth noting that while bosses can't be frozen, a lot of standard enemies can, and that just adds another little layer of comfort. Neuvillette being the Hydro Dragon and Citlali having a dragon plushie is a nice little synergy too. It's a bit of a ball ache that they decided to drop 2 in-demand 5 stars on the same day. That's gonna leave you primo gems in a grave next to all of Mavuika and Citlali's friends. I wish you the best of luck with your pulls, and if you do manage to grab both of them, you get an extremely strong team, arguably one of the strongest in the game. Firstly, 3 sustain units means you're going to be as immortal as Citlali herself. Secondly, the 3 of them buffing Mavuika means her charge attacks are going to hit like a string of nukes. With Citlali applying cryo, free-to-play elemental mastery weapons like Mailed Flower could be a strong option on Mavuika. I don't know if you're the sentimental type, but if you watch Citlali's trailer, bringing flowers to this team gives it a nice bit of synergy. For artifacts, I'd give Xiaolonen Scroll and Citlali Tenacity, but Instructor's an option too. Thrilling Tales on Citlali will give Mavuika another big buff. Just bear in mind you might want to extend your rotation to 20 seconds so you can get the Thrilling Tales buff every time. Sticking with pyro DPSs, let's give Gaming some love because Citlali's given him a new team. Prior to 5.3, realistically his only good team was a vape team with Farina. Now with Citlali, you can go with Bennett, Xianyun and Citlali for a melt team. Gaming's gonna do massive damage with him melting rather than vaping. Citlali gives a massive pyro damage bonus from 4-piece scroll, as well as pyro resistance shred from a passive. There's also the option to go with C6 Diona over Xianyun for the cryo resonance and the 200 elemental mastery to Gaming. I imagine most people are choosing Lanyan from the Lantern Rite event, but for those that choose Gaming, him getting a new 5-star to play with is a big win. I'm lucky enough to have his C6 but barely played him before 5.3 because Farina is so in demand. I think that's a shame because critical as I am of a lot of the designs, I actually think Gaming is one of the better 4-star designs in the game. The fact that both Diona and Bennett are on Citlali's banner works out well for him too. Having another team to use him in feels like getting a new character. Citlali can hold Thrilling Tales too to give him another big attack buff. So Citlali's passive reduces the opponent's resistance to Hydro or Pyro whenever you trigger Melt or Frozen. As long as you run her in a Melt or Freeze team, you'll be good. So let's try her with Electro. As you might know, Superconduct's got a buff in 5.2. Just to give you the full context, when you apply Cryo and Electro to an enemy, it triggers a Cryo explosion dealing Superconduct damage. Opponents hit by that explosion have their physical resistance reduced, which is the half of the reaction people are familiar with, but it's the explosion itself that got the buff. It scales purely off the character's elemental mastery and the character level. With Citlali scaling off elemental mastery and applying off-field Cryo, I felt it made sense to make her the trigger. For Electro, I figured I'd use Raiden. Sucrose gives an elemental mastery buff, crowd control, and an Electro buff to Raiden with a C6. For the last slot, I used Yolan because she can trigger the freeze reaction for the extra Night Soul points from Citlali's passive. That's going to be important to keep the cryo application going longer. Was this team any good? With 4Ps gilded on Citlali for the superconduct damage, I felt the superconduct damage itself was actually alright, but the rest of the team suffered a little. It shows that superconduct has potential though. I think a superconduct artifact set as well as specific support units would push this archetype to be meta competitive. Definitely give it a go and see what you think. One character in desperate need of support is Chaska. On a release, her best team was Auroron, Farina and Bennett. The release of both Mavuika and Citlali gives her a few options though. Citlali is always kicking off with Auroron, so it's fitting that she kicks him out the team. Cryo in for Electro means we can get some melts off, which is appreciated. Citlali as a sustain means we can swap Bennett out for Mavuika for buffs and sub DPS damage. Citlali is also going to buff Pyro and Hydro damage, which benefits all three of the damage dealers in this team. There's also resistance to interruption. On top of all this, if you want to, you could give Citlali Thrilling Tales and buff one of Chaska or Mavuika. This was one of my favourite Citlali teams to be honest, because I like Chaska's gameplay. Stacking the team with Natlan units also gives each character more from their passive. Mavuika gets more fighting spirit for a burst damage and the buff she gives Chaska. Chaska can trigger the extra instance of damage from her passive more often. And Citlali gets more Night Soul points to keep her skill going. Bennett over Mavuika would give Chaska more attack, but you lose an extra damage dealer and trigger less Night Soul burst for the passives. The biggest downgrade though is that Bennett's circle restricts movement, which in my opinion is one of Chaska's strengths. I found the damage was enough anyway, so I value the freedom of movement more. It's also nice to give Chaska the freedom of movement, given the fact her sister lost hers. Cryo seems to have overtaken Geo as being the lame horse Hoyo doesn't love anymore, but Citlali is a boost for Cryo. Even though she doesn't reduce the opponent's resistance to it like she does with Hydro and Pyro, she does buff your team's Cryo damage by 40% with Scroll. With people speculating a Wriothesley rerun in 5.4, it makes sense to give him a run out. I tried a few Wriothesley teams. One freeze team with Citlali, Yelan and Kazuha, another with Bennett instead of Kazuha, and another with Mavuika instead of Yelan. They all felt a little underwhelming, but I'm not really a big fan of Wriothesley's gameplay. I want to like it, but it always feels like I'm running a 4-star that I want to be good but have to concede they won't be because it's a 4-star. Except he's a 5-star. Do Mavuika and Citlali work with him? Yes. Are these teams competitive in the meta? Not really, but I imagine you'll be able to run these teams in most of their seasons. If you're a regular here, you already know I had to give Dia some love. Was this team any good? Not as strong as the other Pyro DPSs to be honest, but if you can get Dia's C4, build less energy recharge and maybe throw some elemental mastery on it, I think the team could be alright. For a score, I'd give Citlali a 9 out of 10. She enables some nice melt teams, gives Freeze a little buff even if it's not enough to compete with a meta, and she facilitated the use of less popular characters like Gaming and Kaya. There are also more teams for characters I don't have or don't use like Yoimiya and Linny that you could try. Her shield is quite weak though, and the most disappointing thing is that she didn't do a whole lot for Cryo as an element. They're probably saving all that for Snezhnaya to be honest. I dropped a video showing my favourite teams for the year yesterday, as well as a teams video for Mavuika earlier. I'll be doing one for Lanyan when she drops too. Subscribe to the channel if you're interested in them, and take it easy.